We're going to talk about the brachas at a bris. Now, I'm sure everybody here has been to quite a few, and the mole has a card, a laminated card telling you what to say, what the Aviyah Ben is supposed to say. Nowadays, more and more gentlemen take it upon themselves. They want to learn how to do the circumcision themselves. Why would they do such a thing? Mitzvah go, yoser b'shlucho. It's better do the mitzvah yourself. However, I learned from Rabbi Soloveitchik in New York, Rabbi Hillel Soloveitchik, when they were honoring everybody with writing a letter in the Sefer Torah at the end, under the supervision of the sofer. And he got his turn. He said, I'm appointing the sofer to be my shaliach to write the letter for me. Why did Rabbi Soloveitchik want to write the letter? Because the sofer is a professional. Okay? Sometimes, for things like safras, and especially bris milah, maybe, yes, mitzvah go yoser b'shlucho, unless the shlucho is a real mumche, and this is the type of thing you might not want to do, you can mess it up, right? So it's better. The Shulchan Aruch talks about you ask the professional, the best mole around, to do the bris. And so, like I said before, there's one local mole who's really good. Okay? I saw he was inspecting the child half an hour afterwards. It's like a complete recovery. I've never seen a better circumcision done. Okay? How do you do it? Real tziyat d'shmaya, yeah?
All the pictures that the model
I heard that's a Bubba Meiser. Really? Yeah. So someone telling me that. I was looking into it. Yes. Yeah. Okay. Let's see here. Tana Rabbanu. Amal, right here in the middle of the page, Kuf Lamed Zayin with this. Amal, Omer Asher Kiddushan b'Mislotav v'Silanu al Hamilah. We're familiar with that. Avia Ben Omer Asher Kiddushan b'Mislotav v'Silanu la'achniso b'Brito shel Avraham Avinu. And that's the bracha the father says. The implication here, it says the mal, the one who is, or the mohel, the one who is circumcising. And then the father says, the implication is that the father is not the one who is circumcising. That's the implication. And then it says, who else is there? Ha'omdim omrim, keshem shenichnas lebrith, kach yikones l'torah l'chuppah u'masim tovim. That's their response. It's not a bracha. Now, we have here keshem shenichnas lebrith, right? We're going to see in the Rambam, there's another girsa, hichnas to. Hichnas to means you brought him into the bris. They actually address the father, not as the child has passively been brought into the bris. Nichnas is the child has come into the bris. No, as you have brought him into the bris, he's part of the covenant now, so should you be able to bring him, or here it says hikanes. Hikanes is continuing the passive form. Okay? Or you'd say, Keshem she hichnas to lebris kach hachnes. So shall you be able to bring him into more Torah mitzvahs and Chuppah and Ma'asim Tovim. V'amavarech omer, who's the mavarech? So whoever happens to be there. Someone nowadays they give this like a kibbutz, right? Asher kidash yedidni batem v'chok d'sherosam. Notice there's no vav chibur. I'm reading it the way it appears in our siddur. This says sa'al hatam be'oth b'rith kodesh al kain b'scharzot el chaykel kenu sivar tzaveh. Already you see on the side there's a note. If siva means past tense, right? Now we could say it because most brachos are in the past tense, but some say it's tzaveh. Why would you think that? Because the Rambam adds a word kishet tzivisa, okay? Just as you have commanded. Command tzaveh is the full form of the imperative of this verb. Siva is past tense, okay? Past tense and also third person. Tzaveh is second person. It's imperative. What's the short form of tzaveh? Tzav. Like we have in a few parshas like that. So what does this bracha mean? Asher kidash yedidi beten. He who has sanctified the beloved one from the womb. Who's the beloved one from the womb? Now, what does kidash be beten? Chazal say that when you're dealing with kohanim and firstborns, they have an automatic kedusha to them, right? As it happens, they're born that way from conception. Whereas others get sanctified. Let's say even sacrificial animals. The bechor of the animal is sanctified, whether you like it or not. It's a mitzvah for you to do something about it, but it has a sanctity whether you like it or not. And then there's a korban that's not a bechor. We just declare it is holy. So too, some people get sanctified after they're born. So we want to know here, who's the Yedid Mebetin? Who's been sanctified? So you see Rashi says this is a reference to Yitzchak. Okay? What does it say? Yitzchak Kari Yedid Al Shem Asher Ahavta. God told Abraham for the Yakedah, the binding of Isaac, take the one you love. He's the Yedid. And Mebetin means the Kodem Shalad Nitkadesh Mitzvazo. Okay? Yitzchak had already been set aside for this commandment. He had been told, you're going to have a child, Yitzchak. And by the way, circumcise all your children on the 8th day. Right? Aval Sareish Techa, Harav, Yoladith Bain. She's going to have a child. Lakimoti et Briti Ito, Hainu Milah. It says, God told already about Yitzchak that the bris will be with Yitzchak. Because Avraham Avinu had said, wait a minute, they're implying that my 13-year-old son, Yishmael, is a reject. Or maybe even a lot of times in the olden days, it doesn't say it explicitly, but what happened to Vashti? Achashverosh removed her from her queenship, and she's never going to see the king again. Well, so what did he do to her? Expelled her? So they say Pshat is he had her killed, but they don't say it explicitly. Avraham is worried that if Yishmael is, Lu Yishmael Yichel Fanecha, you should at least live. I hope you don't have bad plans for him. And God's response to Avraham Avinu was, Yishmael will be fine. Yishmael Shmaticha. I also heard you. I'll bless him. He'll be great. Shnei Masar Nisim Yolid. He also has a certain schus. He'll have 12 tribes descend from him also. But he's not the chosen one. The bris will be with Yitzchak. You have to keep Yishmael away. As long as Yishmael's around, it gets in Yitzchak's way. Yishmael was always there, itching for a fight or willing to try to reclaim what was once exclusively his. So watch out. And the problem with what Rashi's saying is that Rabbeinu Tam disagrees. Okay? Rabbeinu Tam says, you see in Tosfos over here, Omer Rabbeinu Tam, Shehu Avram Avinu, Shenikra Yedid. Okay? Actually, Avram Avinu is explicitly called Yedid. Where does it say that? Shemar, Mali Yedid B'Veithi. Okay? Yirmiyahu, the Navi's worrying about Am Yisrael went off the derech. What happened? They brought my beloved to my house. Okay. Did Arshinam be Menachos Perkla Menachos? Says in this chapter of Menachos what? This reference. It says, Ushloshet Avot Nizkarim Chok B'Shero Sam. Now we're going to mention the other ones. Chok B'Shero Sam means he set a statute in his she'er. She'er is another word for flesh, but relatives. The flesh of the relatives. It's like you say in English, also expression taken from Hebrew, atzmi sari, flesh and blood, flesh and bone. Okay? Something like that. Who Yitzchak? So this is a reference to Yitzchak. You did me better as Avinu. Chok b'shevo sam is Yitzchak, Avinu. It says, Hatham be'uthbit kodesh, and his progeny he stamped with the sign or the token of the holy covenant. That's Yaakov. It says Av, Hu Vanav. Okay? So it says Av, that's Yaakovinu, and everybody after Yaakovinu. The Moshe Tzigim Yonathan, Hatzetzaim, Hatzefiot, Benaya. Okay? Yonasan says that these Tzchaim, those are the children. Uvnei Benaya, and the grandchildren. Klomar Yotzei Tzatzav. So that's how Tosfos understands this bracha. We should say it in English so people understand it when they say it. Everybody says the bracha, but it's already Rashi and Tosfos understand it differently. Tzetza'av is acharav, according to Rashi. Okay. So what are we saying here? Al kain b'scharzot, in the merit of keeping this covenant or this commandment, el chai chelkenu, okay, God, chai chelkenu, He's a living God, and he's also our portion. Why is it our portion? Because technically speaking, you could have, let's say, really fancy pants Europeans claiming to be circumcised. It doesn't make them part of God's portion. It doesn't count as a bris. The Rambam allows, as we're going to see, for Gentiles to circumcise themselves. Not because they're converting, and not because they're part of this covenant, but because they realize that God doesn't like Orla. Okay? Even if the Gentile wants to be more refined, he should circumcise himself so as not to be unclean. We discussed this before. What happens to a person who's uncircumcised? He suffers certain maladies and certain discharges basically all the time. So it's better not to be circumcised. It's better to be circumcised just from a strictly hygienic or clean aspect. Circumcision has been adopted by other cultures even without Jewish influence. Where they prominently know about ancient circumcision, who practiced circumcision, attested to very well, and on the Midrashim also. The Egyptians, the priestly class of the Egyptians, had a form of circumcision. Okay. Let's see here. So we say al chayklkenu, tziva latzil yedidut sheirenu mishachat. He commanded to save the yedidut, it means the beloved ones, of sheirenu, our survivors, what's left of us, or you could say it's our, once again, family, flesh and blood, mishachat. Rashi says, from Gehenna, what does it say? Dichtiv, gam at badam britcha shalachti asirecha libor ein mayim bo. This is almost the Hasidish idea that God saves those who are members of the covenant. He has sent his malachim apparently to save our asirim, his prisoners, from the bore, once again like a cistern where Yosef was without any water. Okay, bore and mean mine bo. They dig a cistern, a bore, normally to keep water. But sometimes if it's nice and deep and you can close it up enough, you could use it as a dungeon. And that's what they used to do to people. So this is basically a prayer for the redemption. I said Siva, or Tzaveh. You're asking God to command his emissaries to rescue Am Yisrael from the Galus. L'man brito asher sam biv sarenu, for the sake of his command which he placed in our flesh. Baruch ato Hashem koreit habari. In English we say we cut a deal. Now, in what sense is it cutting? Figuratively it's cutting. What do you actually cut? In Hebrew, to enter into a covenant is koreit, which figuratively means to cut a deal, and literally means to cut. Right? Excision is koreit. In this case, a bris is both literally and figuratively cutting a deal. Because you got to do some cutting to do a circumcision. So there's the literal cutting, and it's also enacting a covenant. So the fact that cutting a deal is a figurative expression comes already from biblical Hebrew. It's also there in Sefer Shmuel and other places. Quote lanu Brit, cut a deal with us. Let's make a treaty of some sort. We'll surrender. Right? Good. So it means understand it as both. Let's read the next thing about circumcised slave, and then we could read the longer Tosfos and understand what they're getting at. Rabbeinu Tam's argument that we also discussed last time. Okay, this is a standard bris. Most of us have never been at the bris of a slave. Why? Because Jews haven't been holding slaves for a few centuries. But there is something to be said then. What would they name the child? Notice the the Gemara here does not mention the baby naming ceremony. Right after the last bracha, right? Then they take out a cup of wine. They didn't mention the cup of wine, technically, because it's unnecessary. It's a minhag we do to show the hashivus of what we're doing right now. That ritual of naming the baby, special prayer to name the baby, is not demanded by halacha. There was a fellow who had a hard time. His child was born unwell, very, very much a preemie. They knew they were going to delay the bris even if he had been born on time. They knew they were going to delay the bris. And the shaila they had, can they just name the child, give him a name before circumcision? And so it shouldn't be a shaila. A local rabbi said, I told him, yeah, Havamina, there is no reason not to. It's just something they do. I heard a Baba Maisa when I was growing up that the child is as though he's not Jewish, so we don't give him a name until his bris. But that's not true. Okay? And not only that, this old minhag is where they declare his name, said his name shall be this and that. That was just the way of the parents informing everybody. But really, they could have just given the name beforehand. Parents were calling him his name since he was born. So a local rabbi who was very knowledgeable wrote a long tshuva for everybody, saying that, yes, there's nothing wrong with naming the baby, even at the moment of birth. As a matter of fact, that's what we get from the Torah. What does it say concerning Yitzchak? The first one about whom we're just saying a blessing right now. What does it say about Yitzchak? Avram called this child Yitzchak. And Abraham circumcised his child Yitzchak when he was 8 days old, just as God commanded. Okay? Haraya. And that's the way it is throughout the Torah. Many children who obviously were circumcised were named right when they were born. Sometimes because the events that were leading to the birth or at the birth inspired the mother or the father. And that's the way it is throughout Sefer Bereshis. Who else is named at birth? Well, Binyamin, and apparently Yehuda's sons, and all of Yaakov's children, and Yaakov and Esav. Okay? So everybody there is named before they were apparently circumcised. So it's okay to do so. Let's see here. If you were getting at this, if you were to have a slave being named, what would we call a slave then? So-and-so has acquired a slave. Up until now, he was Lucas Goiberg. Instead of Goldberg, he's Lucas Goiberg because he's a guy. And now he is converting to Judaism. Or he is entering into servitude to some Jew. Or Lucas Goiberg, as he used to be known, has had a son, okay, a slave, another Evet Kanani, who is in charge of circumcising this young Kanani slave. Whose simcha is it, basically? The master's. The father, the biological father, is not in the picture at all. Okay? It's the master's. So the master has to arrange the bris. And this child will be called, Lucas Eved Avraham, just like Eliezer Eved Avraham. Okay, that was his name, not Lucas Ben so-and-so the slave. He's just a slave. That's how it would go. And until he is emancipated, he will continue to be called that the rest of his life. Okay. Yeah. Hold on one second. Okay. Let's see here. Hamalas Agerin. If one were to circumcise converts to Judaism, maybe ever been present at this thing? On one aspect it's harder, one aspect it's easier. Okay? Babies don't move around that much, but you have less to work with, smaller workspace. Circumcising adults is technically easier. In the olden days, how did they anesthetize the adult before they want to give him a bris? Classic forms of anesthesia were basically lots of alcohol or poppy juice. That's what poppy juice. Okay, like in Egypt and other places, well known. Chazal basically, what are they digging up? The Kanei Bosem of the Shemin HaMishcha and the Ketores was, according to many, what Rashi calls cannabis, Kanei Bosem. Now, we didn't have people getting high and walking around smoking it, though it was an essential ingredient in all sorts of forms of incense. And apparently there were cults around here where that was part of the process. They put Kanei Bosem and put it on the coals, and it would cause people to have trances and see things and do things like that. But they did not use it for its medicinal purposes. Okay? And apparently in Rashi's time, they were just using it for fibers. That's what Rashi always uses the example. But it used to be, and even today, in the olden days, they'd give the potential convert general anesthesia, which means they get him really drunk or have him drink a lot of poppy juice so that they could properly circumcise him and then he'll recover. Nowadays, it's much easier. What do? They don't need to give a general anesthetic. They don't need to get the guy drunk. Instead, they give him a local anesthetic. Okay? Much more simple. Thank God for technology. So one who circumcised the Gerim says, Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav al ha-milah. Same bracha as one circumcising a child. Yeah. So we're going to see that in the Rambam, what is he paskin? Now this is a little bit awkward. Now this is the Mevarech. This apparently is parallel to the fellow who says the bracha asher kidash yidid mibetem, the post-bris bracha for a child. But the text of this bracha also has an asher kiddushan b'mitzvotav formula to it. and it's Lamul Sager, it's more specific. I would have thought, right here. No. And then when you start counting lines, it's across from where it says Rashi Tolin. Oh, you don't have the source of Daf. I don't know what.
Is only on Milah.
Alamila. Vamvarich Omer, and the other one, the one who gets to say the bracha says, Asher Kiddusham Mitzvosav, Vitzivanu Lamos Hagerim, Ulatif Behem Dambris. Shel Ilmole Dambris. Now, it started like a bracha, like a regular Asher Kiddusham Mitzvosav bracha, over Lasiyasam. But now it seems he's getting to more things. To circumcise the gate, the converts, and to extract from them the blood of the covenant. Shil male dam berith, for if not for the blood of the covenant, lonith kaimu shamai va'ares. Okay, the heavens and earth would not continue to exist. Shneimar im lo brithi yomam u'layla, if it were not, it says in the pasuk, if not for my covenant, day and night, halchos shamai va'aretz lo samti. The statutes of heaven and earth I would not have placed. Baruch atah Hashem korei taberith. So this bracha looks like the bracha that someone says at the bris, praising God also for giving us the covenant and God willing to save us from the gullus in the memory of the covenant. But this bracha ends with the chasima, and also the text tells you it's more like a bracha of praise and less like the beginning sounded, which is a bracha birkas ha-mitzvos. We're about to perform a mitzvah, so we're going to say this. And this leads to a little bit of a confusion here. Well, you have a question about that? Yeah.
I'm confused with what you say.
Right.
We have our Milah, very good.
Yes.
Now we have another bracha with a mitzvah involved. What's the mitzvah?
Asher Kiddusham Mitzvosav, it's about Lamul Sagerim. Lamul Sagerim Ulatif Behem Dam Baris. To do two acts, to circumcise them or to remove Dam Baris. Why do they mention this? Because sometimes you have a fellow who wants to convert to Judaism. Let's say, we'll assume, King Charles III actually was circumcised when he was a baby. Okay, I dispute that. However, let's say it's true. And now, for whatever reason, he's going to abdicate because he wants to join the Jews.
Where do you have a mitzvah?
It says in my text of the Gemara here. It's also
now. Where in the Torah do you have a mitzvah?
Oh, you're asking a kasha, not on the text of the Gemara. You're asking a kasha on that.
What's the mitzvah here?
What's the mitzvah? It says that anybody, the Rambam says, with regards to laws of conversion, he brings the Gemara and says that there are three acts by which Am Yisrael, as individuals, all enter the covenant. And those three acts were circumcision, and tevilah, and korban. So, Lidoros, sacrifice. Okay? Animal sacrifice. So the Rambam says, Lidoros, forever. Just like every Israelite who left Egypt and wanted to receive the Torah had to undergo circumcision and immersion and bring this sacrifice, so too every candidate for conversion in the future will have to undergo circumcision and immersion and bring a sacrifice. Two exceptions. The first exception is a convert who is unable to, for whatever reason, bring a sacrifice because he lives in the land of Israel, he lives in Jerusalem even, but the regime will not let him bring sacrifice, is an anus, so he cannot bring the sacrifice. So he'll just have to mark it in his notebook that he owes God a nice sacrifice when the time comes. That applies to men and women. The other exception is women. Women, last I checked, cannot undergo circumcision. So a woman who converts to Judaism only has to undergo immersion and the bringing of the sacrifice. You have a question about that?
No, you're not answering my question.
I'm trying to. So,
I want to know where in the Torah do we have a mitzvah that says there's a requirement to
It says in the book of Berachot, two places. Ready? Avraham Avinu was told anybody who joins your group, okay? Not just those who are born and not just you lead bias and miknas kesef. Anybody who wants to be part of the club has to circumcise. So too, it says at Yetzias Mitzrayim, everybody has to be circumcised, can't be arelim, or they can't participate. Okay? Arelim are excluded. Yeah.
That's the fact. Why do you call it a mitzvah? Why does Ashir Kiddush HaKadosh Baruch Hu commanded us to do this? Lamulas Hagerim.
Yeah.
Same thing as common.
Same as Avraham Avinu himself. Avraham Avinu is the father of the Gerim. No. I think we have to understand the verses. Avraham Avinu himself. Okay. Let's work with
There's a mitzvah
Rashi.
There's a mitzvah to Kodesh Baruch Hu. There's a mitzvah specifically to circumcise Jews.
Yeah.
All right. And there's a process of conversion to circumcise Goyim.
Yes.
Seder. Who says that that's a mitzvah to do?
So I'm trying to say the way we understood the psukim with regards to Avraham Avinu is that anybody who wants to be part of the club has to undergo circumcision.
Fine.
Yeah. So that's a
Why
commandment.
is it a mitzvah?
So that's what we call a commandment. Really, they could say the conversion candidate himself is disqualified from saying this bracha because he's not Jewish yet. So the Beis Din are the ones who say it, or the mole that they appoint is the one who says it. Okay, it's to show that it's for the sake of the mitzvah, for the sake of conversion. You could hire a Jewish moel, for example, to circumcise a fellow for whatever other reason, like you just said, with these royal types, right?
1 second. I'm very bothered by this now because Tosfos, for example, the last Tosfos on the page, gives us a reason why you say Asher Kiddishanu by Avodim.
Yes.
But that means that you have to have a source for that. We don't have a source for Gerim.
I think I do. I believe the way we have always understood the verses when Avraham Avinu is given this commandment is that anybody who wants to be part of this, like Avraham Avinu himself, what was the deal with Avraham Avinu and Yishmael and all of Avraham Avinu's Anshe Beso? What's the point of Anshe Beso? Not everybody was a slave of Avraham Avinu, right? And Avraham Avinu and Yishmael themselves, they elected to do this. That's why it emphasizes. It says 3 times, Avram and Yishmael Beno did this that very day, and Avram was 99 and Yishmael was 13. It's a zchus for both of them that they understood that God's commandment is that anybody who wants to lachsos tachas kanfei Shechina is circumcised. Maybe we should see this over here. It's a very important that we know what we're saying.
When does that bracha take place? And who says it?
What?
You say the Beis Din says it?
Yeah, well, hold on a second. It says hamvarich. The mal and the mavarich.
Okay.
Yeah.
So whoever they are, the moel says al hamilah. He does the process. Okay, so I can understand that. Hold on.
Okay, here's the pasuk. Ready? I'm sorry I didn't say this explicitly. Ready for the pasuk?
Right.
This will be the answer to your question. Rambam says "Uchein lidoros." Okay, so too for every generation. Kishayirtzak goy likanis labris was tofef tachas kanfei Shechina. He wants to enter the covenant and be able to flourish and dwell underneath the wings of the divine presence. We kabel love ol Torah and also accept the yoke of the Torah. Why does the Rambam say all these? Likanis labris means he gets to share in the responsibilities and rewards. Okay, that means he has to be part of the club in order to get gift of Eretz Yisrael. And listofes tachas kanfei Shechina means have a special share, in the world to come, and also the hashkacha that Am Yisrael enjoys. The kabel olav ol Torah is the hardest one that the Christians basically said, that's not what we're going to take. We like the idea of covenant and being close to God and all that. We need a religion that makes these promises. But old Torah, we have to keep the entire Torah, no more pork, and we have to keep the Sabbath? That's a little bit harder. Okay? Tzarich Milah, utfila v'artzaat korban. He needs circumcision, immersion, and to have his sacrifice accepted. Rimne kevahi tvila v'korban. If she is a female, she only needs to bring the korban and to immerse. Shnemar kachem kager. Bamidbar tesvav. Kachem kager. Just like you, the ger. Ma atem b'milu tvila v'artzas korban. Just like you Jews entered the covenant originally through circumcision and immersion and the korban. Afager ledoros b'milo utfila v'artzas korban. So too, the convert Okay, for every generation enters the covenant through circumcision, immersion, and having a sacrifice accepted. Okay, so it's a pasuk kachem kager in Bamidbar. Is that a satisfactory answer? I would say checkmate Rambam. He always wins. He wrote the book, after all. How could the Rambam be wrong about halacha? He's the one who wrote the book about halacha. So let's see. Back to this. So this bracha is a little bit ambiguous. Why? Because it sounds like the bracha of praise that is after a child's circumcision, but its opening formula says otherwise. And also is a little bit redundant because the Moller said al hamila, which seems to be catch-all. He doesn't say specifically gerim or children, whatever it might be. The next case is hamalas avodim, one who circumcises the slaves. Omer asher kiddushan b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al hamilah, same as all the other cases, the first two. V'amvarech omer asher kiddushan b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lamulat avadim v'lativ mehem dam berit. This is similar to the previous bracha. It sounds like a redundant bracha of a mitzvah that should be over l'asiyasam, but here he's saying instead of gerim it's avadim. What's the nafkamina between avadim and gerim? Here's the two nafkaminas. An eved is circumcised the day he is purchased. Okay? And when he undergoes this sort of conversion, he will not be completely Jewish. He will be in servitude to someone else. He won't have to keep certain commandments. And he'll also have certain dispensations. Until, or only if, his master eventually emancipates him. And his children will be slaves after him. Whereas the ger is 100% Jewish right afterwards. Second nafkamina is the children of the ger are treated just like Jewish children, straight up. Whereas the children of the eved are also circumcised just like he is. They continue the avdus. So it continues. And also to remove from them dam berit. Why do we add this? Because sometimes the eved, when he is brought into this situation, they don't actually circumcise him. He already has no foreskin. Instead, they just have to prick him a little bit and draw a drop of blood. What is the pricker they use? The same way they used to use for your blood test. This is one of the worst things about becoming an adult. When you're a kid, you need to do a blood test. They prick your finger and they take a few drops of blood, right? And that hurt. But when you become an adult and they need to do a blood test, they take a whole vial from your arm, right? That hurts more. And then your arm is sore afterwards, right? So good thing for the eved or for the ger, when they circumcise them, they don't do the whole vial thing. They just do a simple prick. One drop of blood is good enough. Why? Shilmali dambrith glukos shamayim varts lo nitkai mush nemar yim lo brithi yom v'layla glukos shamayim varts lo samti baruch at Hashem korith habarith. So this blessing is basically the same as what we would have had for the Gentile fellow. Now, in Tosfos over here, you have Rabbeinu Shmuel basically looked at this, and he changed the girsa, or he felt the girsa was different. Aviha bein bereisha v'hadar hamal omer. He basically says that the bracha lachniso, that is first, that's what the father says. And then the one who's actually doing the circumcision says the al hamila bracha. They're both mitzvahs over l'asiyason, and that's what he told people to do. Who is Rabbeinu Shmuel? Is it Rashbam? Could be. Okay. Now, that would be good because if you then have that Rabbeinu Tam disagreed, that makes sense because Rashbam was significantly older than his younger brother Rabbeinu Tam. Okay? Here it goes. And he says here, this lachniso is it's the infinitive form, what we call, to do this. So there's this concept that they talk about in the Psachim. You say, al biur chametz. We're about to do it. Some say liva'er as a chametz. We're about to do it. Liva'er sounds like a future tense. All the infinitives in Hebrew verbs are basically the future tense verb, but instead of having a prefix aleph, yud, or taf, or nun, you have a lamed. Okay? So the infinitive looks like a future tense verb. Okay, that's how he felt. And I'll continue over here. Basically, because it's a mitzvah to bring the child into the bris, That's what the father is basically saying. It's my duty to have this child become a member of the tribe, so that's what I'm about to do. Rabbeinu Tam felt otherwise. Rabbeinu Tam echzira minhag l'kad buto. Rabbeinu Tam put things back the way it was, like presumably the pashtus that we have in the Gemara in front of us. The Garas Hamal Beresha. First, in his version of the Gemara, it says the one who's doing the circumcision says this bracha. That's first. V'hadar, and then Avi Abain. He says his bracha. The father says this bracha. K'moshe katuv b'chol asfarim, just like we have in all our Gemaras. V'chein muchach kula sugya. As a matter of fact, that's how you can understand the sugya that we just read. Why? Midikamar omdim sham omrim kishem shechniso levrit miklal shekfar hichniso. If we have this bris, well, wait a second. If the text says, Father, just as you have brought him into the bris, it's already past tense, a certain past tense, that's their response. But you could say, wait a minute, I looked in our Gemara, it says, Kishem shenichnas lebris. It's still past tense, just from a different subject. Nichnas is the child, hichnis is the father, right? Father brought him in. But either way, it's past tense. Niklal shekvar hichniso. Okay? The omdim, the assembled say, hichniso, so it must be the father did this already. By the way, we'll see this here. What is omdim? There are some people who derive from this that specifically everybody should be standing at the time of the bris. And the Vilna Gaon and the Rambam classically have it that really a lot of things we do in synagogue do not require standing. They're sitting all the time. When do we stand? Strictly speaking, according to the Talmudists, when do we stand? Shmona Esrei Chazar Sashatz, and when the Sefer Torah is moving. That's when you stand. Anything else, even if it's a Davar Shebekdusha, whatever it might be, you may sit. However, nowadays we stand for all sorts of things. They stand for Vehu Rachum as part of Tachanun, even though Tachanun is supposed to be said ideally in what position? On the floor, on one's face, in a bowing position. Okay? Kal v'chomer, you shouldn't be standing. So how do people stand? In order to teach people that this addition should not be treated lightly. They told people to stand. And people stand for the prayer for the state, which makes no sense. And people were standing for Aleinu because, they say it because, how can you not stand for Aleinu? But all these are not recognized by the Rambam and Vilna Gaon as things to stand for. What about when they announced when Rosh Chodesh is going to be? So some people stood for that for whatever reason because the Sefer Torah is already moving. The guy picked up the Sefer Torah. But once he's standing still, you could sit back down. They say, yeah, but it's like Kiddush HaChodesh, so you should stand. But Ikar Din, you don't have to stand. Because what we're doing is just announcing when Rosh Chodesh is going to be. It's not some sort of solemn thing. So the Vilna Gaon concludes here that you do not have to stand. The Omdim, when it says here that the people are standing at the bris, it means the assembled. It's a Hebrew expression meaning the assembled, like the Kahal. But it doesn't mean that everybody has to be standing or everybody should be standing. It's not literally standing. Okay? Where does it say that people stand? Also in the Beis HaMikdash. Okay? The Kohanim and Leviim stand before God. There we do hold that is a form of standing. They should not be sitting. Okay? Because it's forbidden to sit in the Azara. Now, who's the one who gets the Azara? The Davidian king. But he's not a Levi or Kohen, so he's not doing any of the Avodah. Okay, back to Rabbeinu Tam. It says here, V'od degabe gerd v'samuch garas beresha hamal v'adar hamvarech. Next to this, we have the case of the ger. It says there's a person who's circumcising him, says this bracha, and then someone else says a different bracha. Right? L'mos hager v'nirahu shezehu keneged birkas avi avem. This second bracha, which seems to almost be redundant, in the presence of the convert, when at his circumcision, this is also apparently parallel to the father's blessing at his own son's bris. And notice no one's going to say Lach Niso Levriso Shavon Avinu. No one is commanded to take care of this ger or this eved necessarily. Right? A lot of times they're doing it of their own volition. They don't have a father present. And as we concluded last week, we saw that it was a machlokes. The Rambam was insistent. If the father is not present, for whatever reason, then no one's going to say the bracha lach niso lebefriso shavron vinu, or something similar. Why not? Because it's not right. No one else is commanded, even if his adoptive father, the grandfather, is going to be doing that, and that's what the Vilna Gaon said also. So he continues. V'hasam Yivchar l'shanos hagirsa. That we're pretty sure what the girsa says. There's a person who says circumcises the ger, another one says it's bracha. It's pretty clear what it is. Sheish b'yoter bracha latif behen dam Brit. Even though in that bracha it says what? It's supposed to take, it's supposed to extract the blood of the covenant from them. Baruch ato Hashem korith Brit. Mash zehu achar hamilah. Okay, it all is implied that all this is after the milah actually happened. And so too, we always have this. There's supposed to be bracha after the child is circumcised, praising God. That's after the circumcision of a child. But there's a few notes here we should get in. Make note of it. We said already korith is literally, not figuratively. And the Rambam says that one who circumcises his own son doesn't actually say this bracha. The Rambam has a diuk in this thing. It's also in Hilchos Brachos. The Rambam there has that really there's a whole science what bracha to say. The Rambam says the best way to say a bracha is la, okay, the infinitive form. And then when you have all these exceptions, we say al, something or other. And the Rambam there has many different rules that everybody disputes. You look at the Encyclopedia Talmudica, basically it seems that others just took the easy approach. Really, there's no difference. Okay, let's say what's the bracha you say on a lulav? Taking the lulav, what is the bracha? Al netilaf lulav. Why not litolef halulav? Al netilaf yadayim. Why not litolef yadayim? But on a sukkah, it's not al yeshivat sukkah. It's leshev basukah, the infinitive form. Some say, and there might be some legitimacy to this. Really, there is no solid rule, and perhaps both forms are just as valid. But the Rambam has his own way about this. Let me show you in Hilchos Brachos. The Rambam, in Milah he says one thing. We're going to read Milah, but in the Brachos, let's see here. Okay, hold on. I'll read it here. Rambam's distinction. He says, the mol beno, let's say the mol happens to be the father, mivarech v'tzivanu lo mulat habein. Okay? So you already see this is consistent with the Rambam's, what he wrote elsewhere. Someone who's doing the real mitzvahs the right way should say the bracha in the infinitive form. Okay? What else does he say here? Mitzvah av lemuach beno yater al mitzvah shem suvim kol Yisrael sheyumulu kol orel shebeinehem. You hear that line? There's a mitzvah of Am Yisrael to make sure everybody among them is circumcised. So what do I have to do? I heard that the other fellow is uncircumcised. I have to do something about it? What's the answer? Whenever you have a group responsibility, it goes on to the Beis Din. Now, ideally, every town should have one recognized Beis Din that has the authority to enforce these rules. Just like it says Beis Din makes sure that everybody is going to cheder, right? Every child is taken care of and every child is going to school. That's also Beis Din's responsibility. And Beis Din is supposed to intervene in a number of other social issues. And the Rambam here basically would say that, is there room, therefore, to say Lamula Tagirim instead of Al Hamilim, Lamula Tagirim Stam? Is there such a thing? So you turn the page here, and it seems that is what the Rambam did. He basically combined it. What does it have here? He says, first of all, Kitsi Visa, like I said, Savei Kitsi Visa, command just like you have commanded. And then he says, Amalas Agerim Mivarech. Listen to this. Does it fit our Gemara? Baruch Ato Hashem, Elokeinu Melech Haolam, Asher Kiddushon b'Mitzvotav, V'Sivanu Lamuot Hagirim, V'Latif Mehem Dam Barith, Shel Ilmalei Dam Barith, Lo Nitkaimu Shamayim La'aretz Nemar, Im Lo Briti Yomam Lech, Lo Shamayim La'aretz, Lo Samti. There you go. One bracha. Basically, what the Tosafists and our Gemara basically said is, first there's a bracha that the Mol says, La Mulas Hagirim, or Al Hamilah. And then there's a second bracha that mentions La Mulas Hagirim in the infinitive form, but that's a bracha that's said afterwards, is praise of God, the Rambam basically says, no, that second bracha is the only bracha. Molas HaGerim says, Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvosav v'tzivanu l'molas HaGerim l'latif mehem dam bris. Okay? So the Rambam doesn't necessarily fit our Gemara. And then he continues with the Avodim. Hamolas Avdo. Not it's Avodim, Avdo. In this case, there's a big nafkamina. The way we had in the Gemara, you have it that a man has bought a slave. Okay? He's made a contract. Joe Goiberg, as we said before, Lucas Goiberg will become slave to Mr. Saknovitz. Okay? So you don't know how to do Milah. So what do? You'll bring him to the Beis Din to find a mole who can, circumcise a grown man. So it says the Mal is going to say the bracha al Hamilah, and someone else is going to say the bracha, Asher Kidsham is supposed to be Tzvanu Lemulas Ha'avadim, Latif Me'en Dam Bris. The way the Rambam has it is Hamalas Avdo. He's doing himself. What does he say? Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam asher kiddusham b'mitzvotav v'sivanu lamulat ha'avodim latif mehem dam brit shel moli dam brit, etc. Right? And this time, in my gears of the Rambam, il mole isn't spelled with a yud; it's spelled with an aleph. What's the correct spelling?
He does away with the original.
Yeah. V'mal avdo shel acherim, but if he's circumcising someone else's slave, remember, the Rambam's big distinction is he doing his mitzvah or someone else's mitzvah? Al milas ha'avadim, not al hamilah. Al milas ha'avadim. Okay. V'amal adam gadol tzarich l'chasos ervaso. Also, if this fellow is a grown up, he actually cover his erva while saying the bracha. Can't say God's name. So why don't we cover up the child's? Put the diaper back on while we're saying the brachos. The answer is a child's erva is not considered halachic erva until he's much older. Okay? So you see here, the Rambam doesn't exactly have it the way we had it. He doesn't understand the Gemara the way we have it. And he doesn't even get into the machlokes in the Tosfos in front of us between Rabbeinu Shmuel and Rabbeinu Tam. Okay? So there's a lot there that Sarach Iyun, but what do they do? Like the Rambam or like the Gemara? Okay? And Shulchan Aruch has it slightly differently. Okay? So he also says Hatafas dam bris has no bracha. Ger shemal kodem sheyiskayer v'kodem shtulad mahul kishmativ men dam bris ein tzrichin bracha. Okay, there is no bracha. V'yesh omrim she'ein mevarchim bracha birkas al milah elav mevarchim lachniso bevriso. Okay, there are those who also dispute this essential line. Maybe you should have a bracha lahatif es adam, right? There's room to say. Okay, so a little bit difficult. One more point over here. The Shechianu. What do we owe with Shechianu? So they say that at least the standard form that we have here in the Rambam is that this is a mitzvah that's infrequent, certainly usually less than once a year. So the father says a Shechianu, even if he's not doing the circumcision. And there are others who said, no, if the father's not doing the circumcising, he doesn't do it. But the Maimonidean response is, he's also saying la'achniso. No matter what, the father is doing that, so the father should say Shechianu. Your standard version of the brachas in Chutz La'aretz, among the Ashkenazim, have no Shechianu bracha. Right? They assume the mole's doing it, you don't say Shechianu. However, the Vilna Gaon like what the Rambam says, and the Eretz Yisrael practice is the father still says Shechianu, even if he's not the circumciser, and that's probably what you saw at your grandson's bris once you made Aliyah, right? Yes. So that's what they do. They say Shechianu, and once again, that's because the Rambam and the Vilna Gaon are very liberal with the bracha of Shechianu. They basically claim people have forgotten this bracha. Okay? There's a lot of times when God dafka wants you to say Shechianu. Just like the Ashkenazic practice, people were like, the Hasidic Ashkenaz were saying, how can I say Shechianu during the 3 weeks? Oy devalt. And the Vilna Gaon's opinion is, if you have a bris on Tisha B'Av, you say Shechianu. Okay? Even a bris on Tisha B'Av, the Vilna Gaon says, a bris on Tisha B'Av, you say Shechianu on Tisha B'Av. More than that, if you're going to be reading Eicha from the Klaf, there's two brachas, Al Mikra Megillah and Shechianu. Shechianu on reading Eicha on Tisha B'Av? Yes. So there you go. So Kal V'chomer, you're supposed to say Shechianu whenever the sages told you to say Shechianu, even if it's 3 weeks, even if you don't like it, whether you like it or not. For some reason, they don't have a problem saying Dayan Emes. People would have a harder problem with that bracha. But, yeah. Okay, well, there you go. It's not nothing to do with the father. The father has to say Sheikh Yanu. He's doing the mitzvah. Father's not in pain. So we'll stop here, although there is a lot more to say. Maybe we'll cover it next time, but that's the end of the parak. Slika Allah. Hadran Allah, Rabbi Eliezer de Milah, Hadran Allah. We'll come back to this chapter next time. Any questions, comments? In internet land? No. Okay. See you all next time. Be good.